Naruto vs One Piece. Which is the better anime? Monkey D. Luffy, the sun god Nika, the warrior of liberation, and soon-to-be pirate king, has become one of anime's most legendary protagonists. With Gear 5, his powers break the very logic of combat itself. He can reshape his environment, nullify damage, and bend reality like a cartoon character defying physics. It's flashy, it's absurd, and it's everything fans love about One Piece. On the other side, we have Naruto Uzumaki, the boy who grew up shunned and ridiculed, only to rise to become the 7th Hokage, the savior of his people, and the embodiment of never giving up. Even though Naruto has passed his peak, especially with the loss of Kurama and the Sage of Six Paths powers, his story remains one of the most emotional and inspiring in anime history. But here's the thing, today's discussion is not about who would win in a fight. This is not another Luffy versus Naruto power scaling debate. Instead, we're asking a much harder question: which one of these two big three anime is actually worth your time? To answer that, we'll explore them across several categories: world building, politics, lore, characters, pacing, fights, power scaling, and legacy. Each section will be broken down in detail using examples from the stories themselves. By the end, we'll see which anime gave us the most impactful experience overall and why both deserve their legendary status. World building. When it comes to world building, One Piece stands in a league of its own. Akira Oda has created a living, breathing universe with hundreds of islands, each unique in culture, geography, governance, and history. Think of Skypiea, the floating civilization in the clouds where people live among gods, legends, and lightning, or Thriller Bark, a gothic horror-inspired island full of zombies, shadows, and a villain straight out of a nightmare. Then you have Dressrosa, modeled after Spanish culture, filled with colorful festivals and tragic stories of oppression. Zo is perched on the back of a giant elephant that has walked the seas for thousands of years, and introduces an entire species of humanoid minks. And of course, Wano, a closed-off samurai nation up a waterfall inspired by Edo period Japan, rich with tradition, rebellion, and layered storytelling. Every country or village you see in One Piece has some kind of history or lore to it, which makes them memorable in one way or the other. The sheer creativity and diversity of these islands ensures that every arc in One Piece feels like entering an entirely new world. You're not just following the Straw Hats, you're immersing yourself in a universe that feels infinite. Now, compare this to Naruto. The world of Naruto is structured around the 5 great shinobi nations: the Land of Fire, the Land of Wind, the Land of Lightning, the Land of Water, and the Land of Earth. These nations are culturally distinct in small ways, but largely similar in structure. Each has hidden villages ruled by a Kage, with shinobi fulfilling missions for their nation. Beyond this, we don't see as much radical diversity as we do in One Piece. One of the biggest differences also lies in how power is distributed. In Naruto, power is often tied to bloodlines and clans, like the Uchiha with their Sharingan, the Hyuga with their Byakugan, and the Senju with their legendary chakra reserves. These inherited abilities define much of a character's potential in Naruto. If you weren't born into the right family, your potential was lower. In One Piece, power feels more democratic and random. Anyone could stumble upon a devil fruit and gain powers capable of shaking the world. Anyone could have haki or different fighting styles or different powers. A farmer, a merchant, or a pirate could suddenly become a global threat. Now, One Piece does have strong bloodlines like the infamous D, which as the story progresses is taking a major role, but it's still nowhere near Naruto, which has major plot lines based on bloodlines. This makes the world of One Piece feel more adventurous and unpredictable. Anyone could rise to greatness, anyone could be a strong character with a random fruit or random backstory, not just those born into privilege, although they of course still have their unfair share of greatness. One thing Naruto does better is showing a proper rank structure. Like, you have to advance from Genin to Chunin, and finally to Jonin, mastering high-level ninjutsu. The current Hokage usually selects their successor. Alternatively, the Konoha Council, village elders, and the Jonin commander nominate a candidate. This way, you see most characters developing step by step, rather than just suddenly becoming admiral because of their power that happened immediately. You see side characters getting promoted and getting stronger slowly, rather than abruptly like in One Piece. We'll cover this point in detail later. So, while Naruto's world is cohesive and tightly focused, One Piece offers something larger and wider, stranger, and more endlessly diverse. Winner, One Piece. Politics. If world building is so complex in One Piece, then it should come at no surprise that politics runs a major role in it. The political structure of One Piece is massive, intricate, and constantly shifting. At the very top sits the world government, an organization that has ruled for centuries, built on secrets, cover-ups, and manipulation. Beneath them are the celestial dragons, the so-called nobles, descendants of the creators of the world government. These beings live in unchecked luxury, immune to the law, and their cruelty is justified by birthright. Then you have the Marines, the military arm of the government, admirals, vice admirals, fleet admirals, CP0, and fleets that patrol the seas, supposedly to uphold justice. In opposition to them are the Yonko, the four emperors of the sea. Each rules vast territories in the oceans, with their power rivaling that of nations. Then there's the Revolutionary Army, led by Monkey D. Dragon, Luffy's father, whose sole goal is to overthrow the world government itself. On top of that, you have systems like the Seven Warlords of the Sea, pirates granted freedom to do almost anything in exchange for loyalty. The genius of Oda's world is how fluid this balance of power really is between all these different groups and characters. Admirals retire and are replaced, warlords are defeated and swapped out, Yonko die or are defeated and new ones rise. Power shifts, alliances form and break, and every event ripples across the seas. Take Doflamingo, for example. His position as both a warlord and an underground broker gave him immense leverage, so much so that he forced the Five Elders into spreading fake news around the world. His ability to manipulate the world government through his celestial dragon lineage and secret knowledge of either Void Sentry or one of the four weapons created one of the most dangerous political threats in the series. Now, compare that to Naruto. The shinobi world has politics, but they're far simpler. Each of the 5 great nations is led by a Kage, and while there are rivalries and occasional wars, the structure rarely shifts. The title of Kage is passed down when one dies or retires. Other positions like the Raikage or Tsuchikage are similarly stable. There are the clans or families inside the villages, which are just lineages that pass down beliefs or structure or abilities, and there are additional moments of political intrigue like the 5 Kage Summit, which brings the leaders together to discuss the global threats to all of their nations, but they seem to have a peaceful thing going, for the most part. Most conflicts in Naruto arise not from political power struggles, but from personal vendettas or ideology-driven organizations like the Akatsuki. The Akatsuki threaten global stability, but not through political maneuvering as much. They just sought to collect the tail beasts and ultimately achieve domination through raw power. Now, there were some things like Uchiha facing a kind of racism by Senju, like inter-clan politics, and they were forced into taking over the village, or perhaps the issues faced by the children of the Hyuga clan, which goes into subordination and slavery and interesting ideas there, but it's not delved into as deeply across the whole series as One Piece goes into their politics. In One Piece, the politics feels more alive and essential and core to the story. They evolve, they shift, and sometimes they shape the story in more meaningful ways. Winner: One Piece. Lore, legends, and history. This is where things get more interesting, because here the balance tips towards Naruto. One Piece has some of the most interesting mysteries in anime history. The Void Sentry, an erased 100-year period of history, the enigmatic Will of D, carried by those who shape the tides of the world, the legend of Joy Boy, tied to the dawn of the world, the ancient weapons capable of destroying nations, the shadowy figure of Imu, who secretly rules from the empty throne, and of course, the greatest mystery of all, the treasure of One Piece itself. These mysteries are powerful grounding narrative tools. They keep fans engaged, theorizing, and debating endlessly. However, there is a drawback. After 28 years, over 1,100 chapters, and more than 1,000 anime episodes, the vast majority of these mysteries still remain unsolved. Oda has promised answers, but the pacing suggests that we'll be waiting until the very end of the series. Like, we are just now getting answers related to God Valley incident. I love that we're seeing Zebek in action against Garling, Rogers, and even an Elder, but it would have made more sense to at least show the fights in a bit more panels after waiting for so many years. Like, does anyone know where Enel is, or are we just gonna accept that he somehow went to the moon and will someday return with an army of aliens? For anyone who craves closure, this can be frustrating for a lot of the open-ended things in the series, and as to why, we're gonna discuss this in a bit more detail during the fights section. Naruto, by contrast, gave us some satisfying answers over the course of the series. The Nine Tails' history, Itachi's reasons for killing his entire clan, Tobi's identity, the Sage of Six Paths and his sons Indra and Asura, the origins of chakra, the endless cycle of reincarnation, the history of the Senju and Uchiha clans and the foundation of shinobi society, the 10 beasts and their creation from the 10 tails, the arrival of Kaguya Otsutsuki, and Boruto even dives deeper into this category. While some fans felt that the Kaguya reveal was rushed or unnecessary, the important thing is that Naruto didn't shy away from explaining its core foundations from time to time. In fact, it spread them out throughout the series. It explained how Sage of Six Paths powers can do these astronomical things like summoning meteors or sealing someone in the moon. By the end of the series, the viewers had a clear understanding of the history that shaped the world. Meanwhile, in One Piece, we're still left speculating about a majority of the main plot points that we don't know about. We do know about Joy Boy, but not the full truth. We know the will of D matters, but not why. We know the Void Century is pivotal, but its secrets remain completely hidden. This eternal teasing creates intrigue, but also leaves a sense of incompletion. Maybe if one or two of these were finished at some point over time, but we have a lot of mysteries and not a lot of solved ones. It leaves this sense of incompletion. We might not even like Oda's explanations in the end, so there's a chance some of us won't be satisfied with the time we've put into the series, although I think the fun is in the details. I know some of you will be shouting in the comments that One Piece isn't over and Naruto is, but Naruto, even including the Boruto series, doesn't even come close to 1,000 episodes in total, although it does have its fair share of filler. So you do have to consider this while comparing the time you've spent watching the two. In this category, the winner is Naruto. Characters. Characters are the lifeblood of any story. No matter how good the world building or the fights get, if the characters don't connect with you emotionally, the stories fall flat and the fights are boring. Both Naruto and One Piece shine here, but in very different ways. Main characters. Naruto Uzumaki is one of the most beloved protagonists in the anime world. His journey from a lonely, shunned orphan to becoming the Hokage of Konoha embodies the classic underdog story. What makes Naruto resonate is not just his growth in strength, but his growth in heart and character. He doesn't just want recognition, he wants bonds, acceptance, and to break the cycle of hatred that has consumed the shinobi world for generations. Naruto is deeply human. He struggles with loneliness, anger, and pain, but channels those emotions into empathy for others. Think of his connection with Gaara, or his refusal to give up on Sasuke even when the world tells him to. Naruto even refused to kill Pain in the end, and convinced him to revive everyone out of his own free will. These moments make Naruto a protagonist not just of action, but of heart. Monkey D. Luffy, on the other hand, is almost the polar opposite. Luffy doesn't carry the same burden of loneliness. His motivation is simple, almost childlike. Freedom and the desire to be the best. He wants to be the Pirate King. Not to rule the seas, but because it represents being the freest man alive. Luffy's simplicity is his charm. He's reckless, goofy, and fearless, but when it comes to protecting his friends, he becomes unstoppable. Luffy's emotional impact doesn't come from tragic speeches or deep self-reflection. It comes from just his actions, mostly. When he punches a celestial dragon for abusing a slave, when he rings the bell at Skypiea to honor a fallen hero, refusing to eat until Sanji returns as his cook, or when he declares war on the world government to save Robin. These moments define him. Both Naruto and Luffy are unforgettable protagonists, but they represent different ideals. Naruto is about breaking cycles and overcoming pain. Luffy is about freedom, joy, and defying oppression. It's difficult to say which series or which characters have better character development or are better, but I think Naruto's story is more emotionally layered, while Luffy's is more thematically consistent. Villains. This is where things get spicy. Naruto arguably has one of the best rogue galleries in anime. Zabuza and Haku introduced moral complexity right from the start. Orochimaru embodied pure ambition and scientific cruelty. Pain was revolutionary, presenting a villain whose ideology about peace through pain forced Naruto to confront his own ideals. Itachi Uchiha, once thought of as a cold-blooded murderer, was revealed to be a tragic hero carrying unbearable burdens. Obito Uchiha showed us how one boy's descent into despair could ignite a war. And Madara Uchiha, a godlike presence whose mere arrival shifted the entire balance of power. Each of these villains wasn't just a bad guy to be punched. They carried philosophies, personal traumas, and narrative weight that challenged the heroes. In One Piece, the villains are equally memorable, but in a different way. Crocodile was the first major villain to test Luffy's limits, his political manipulation making him a credible global threat. Enel was godlike, showcasing the absurdity of devil fruit powers. Doflamingo might be one of the greatest villains in anime, a manipulative, sadistic king whose backstory is as twisted as his personality. Kaido, the strongest creature alive, representing brute force and despair. Big Mama, who represents being hungry, and also brute force and magical abilities, having weird, creepy relationships with her objects. Naruto had Nagato, and One Piece have Blackbeard, in a way that they mirror your protagonist but choose a darker path, maybe because they never saw anyone showing the love and protection that the main characters of the series got. So, the difference in here is again in tone. Naruto's villains often feel a bit deeper, and they invoke tragedy, ideology, and emotional pain. One Piece's villains may only show up in their own arc or once or twice, but they invoke spectacle, corruption, and sheer chaos. Both have strengths, but for sheer philosophical weight and emotional impact, Naruto's villains edge out the win. Most of Naruto's villains are defined by their reasons, while most of One Piece's villains are defined by their powers and hunger for control. Side characters. Side characters are where Naruto often surprises people. Characters like Shikamaru, who begins as a lazy genius, ends up avenging his master's death in one of the most satisfying arcs in the series. Neji Hyuga goes from believing destiny is unchangeable to sacrificing himself for Naruto's dream. Rock Lee inspires fans worldwide by proving that hard work can match natural talent, delivering one of the most iconic fights in anime history against Gaara. Even female characters like Hinata, often criticized for lack of screen time or depth, gets moments of growth, like her courageous stand against pain to protect Naruto. Remember how Tsunade refused to fight because of her tragic past? Obito's story showed sacrifice of love, life, and morals at the same time. These arcs give Naruto's sidecast depth and relatability. One Piece, however, thrives on sheer variety. Each of the Straw Hats has a unique dream and backstory that lends itself to their character development. Like Zoro's vow to be the world's greatest swordsman, Sanji's devotion to finding the All Blue and being a chef, Nami's liberation from Arlong's tyranny and desire for cash and to explore, Robin's tragic quest for the Void Century, Frankie's dream of building a ship that sails the world, and so on. Each Straw Hat feels essential, and their backstories are heartbreaking enough to bring fans to tears. But it doesn't stop there. One Piece has hundreds of memorable side characters that each get their slice of the story. Vivi, Bon Clay, Law, Kid, Yamato, Marco, Ace, Whitebeard, even comedic characters like Buggy the Clown leave lasting impressions. Even characters that you may not see in the future sometimes get like 2 episodes worth of backstory, like Kinemon, Rosinante, and Yamato, which we all loved. The issue that One Piece runs into here is that the interactions of these characters are bare minimum to none. You may have all these friends that Luffy makes on his great journey, but in the bigger picture, most of them won't be involved in any major way once they're left behind. You want examples? Rayleigh, who is one of the most legendary figures in One Piece, refused to rush to help Luffy during Marineford or any other arc. I know he helped the crew survive against Kizaru, but that's it. He did help Luffy when he wanted to pay his respects to Ace's grave, but you know what would have helped more than that? Rayleigh helping them escape the Navy and warlords. Let's not even discuss Dragon, because, to be honest, we don't even have any footage of him with Luffy or anything. Also, if you're being honest, Ace's death was one of the worst in the series. But for me, Luffy got him killed because he wanted to pick a Vivre card instead of running away with his brother. Some people will say that he was fighting Akainu after being teased by him, but he was being pushed. It was all going okay until Akainu saw Luffy crawling on the ground for no good reason, and then Ace had to step in just to save him. Oden has one of, if not the best story in One Piece, and yet, when he was killed by betrayal, the so-called Whitebeard family didn't do anything. Whitebeard was always saying stuff like, "You don't betray your family," and "Stand by them for what they are." Even Luffy and Sabo haven't even done anything to avenge Ace's death this whole time. And they might defeat Akainu after 20 years, but you won't feel the same satisfaction. Simple moments of anger or even regret once in a while would have helped carry the revenge plot a bit. So if you're a side character in One Piece, you may get over 100 episodes of screen time, or less than one, but there is a high chance that you will be killed in some random action and get nothing else either way. Koala's story is heartbreaking, but as a human, you can't just connect to a new character every month and then make room for another. Naruto gives us many moments that help you realize the impact of death on a person. Each person is important and necessary, and we notice when they're gone. Remember the ice cream splitting scene between Naruto and Jiraiya after his death? Or when Gaara and Hinata almost died and Naruto lost his mind? Shikamaru crying alone to let it all out, or even Zabuza's final moments after Haku sacrificed himself for him. Iruka asking for forgiveness from Naruto, or Itachi's final words to Sasuke. Heck, Obito started an entire war after seeing the love of his life getting killed by Kakashi. You just can't compare these perfect moments to One Piece. Sure, they paid some tribute for 5 minutes in One Piece, but Jiraiya's books are still a big part of Konoha. After his death, we see his impact on the world. Even speeches from both the good and bad guys are legendary in Naruto. I'm not saying One Piece doesn't have great speeches, but they're not as common, like, "He cried for me! I was his enemy, yet he still cried for me! Those who don't understand true pain can never understand true peace. Justice will prevail, you say? But of course it will! Whoever wins this war becomes justice!" As I said, both are great, but Naruto's ones hit on a personal level, and One Piece quotes are usually related to its world building. So how do we judge this one? Naruto gives more development to its smaller cast of main side characters, and One Piece gives more fresh breadth offering hundreds of personalities, but leaves them usually feeling like NPCs. Fun fact, some people even complain Oda has Nami face syndrome because of how similar most of the female cast look to her. Verdict: I think Naruto wins in emotional depth of side characters and memorability, while One Piece wins in just sheer diversity, pacing, and structure. When it comes to pacing, both Naruto and One Piece have their struggles, but for different reasons. Let's start with Naruto. The anime was notoriously bogged down by filler arcs. Out of its 720 episodes, more than 40% were filler. These ranged from harmless side adventures to completely irrelevant arcs that killed the momentum of the main story. Many fans simply skipped them, sticking to manga canon episodes only. That being said, when Naruto focused on its core story arcs, the pacing was strong. The story escalated consistently, with every arc feeling like a stepping stone to the larger conflict. The Land of Waves arc established the harsh reality of the shinobi world. The Chunin exams introduced rivalries and alliances. The search for Tsunade and the Sasuke retrieval arcs set up future stakes. And in Shippuden, arcs like the Kazekage rescue, Pain's assault, and Fourth Shinobi War tied everything together. What also helped Naruto's pacing is most of the characters are getting trained in one way or another and improving and scaling with the world, so you're always connecting to their hardships and struggles. Like Neji, Hinata, Shikamaru, and Rock Lee trained throughout the entire series, and that's why they played such big roles. They didn't hype Kakashi vs Gai Sensei for no reason, but they gave us mini games between them to show us that they were rivals to the last. Small things like that help Naruto maintain its pacing and keep us entertained long enough through that big ocean of fillers. So while the filler damaged the anime's pacing, the core manga story flowed logically and with a clear escalation towards the finale. And if you really want to, you can probably find a version of Naruto without any of the filler. Now let's compare that to One Piece. Unlike Naruto, One Piece has very little filler. Nearly every episode is tied directly to manga canon. However, this does come with its own problem: slow pacing within arcs. Because the anime tries to stay close to the manga, it often stretches moments to fill time. This means that fights can last for dozens of episodes, and plot progression sometimes drags painfully. The Dressrosa arc, for example, ran for over 100 episodes. While the story was good, the sheer length made it pretty exhausting. The Wano arc followed a similar path, being one of the largest arcs in anime history. Pacing wouldn't have been an issue if every character in One Piece didn't just keep getting stronger every 100 chapters off screen. Take Luffy's crew, for example. Zoro trained with Mihawk and was fighting side characters like Pika, but after that, he somehow jumped straight into cutting meteors, King, Big Mom, Kaido, and now the Five Elders. Same for Sanji and others who you see every episode just relaxing and talking, but you don't see them doing anything to get stronger, and they just rely on plot armor and getting stronger off-screen. This makes the pacing even worse, as the normal episodes don't create any hype for the small arcs, and everyone only waits for the final flashy fights. You'll also get moments like Oda teasing world-shaking events, like the Revolutionary Army clashing with Blackbeard, or the introduction of Seraphim, only to delay the payoff for years. While this builds anticipation, it also frustrates fans waiting for the resolution. You sometimes forget some of the side characters' goals because the last time they appeared was 500 episodes ago, with no screen time in between. A great example of this is the screenshot saying, "The two admirals fought for 7 days and one lost." Show us the cool stuff, Oda. We get their backstories. We want to see the fight too. One Punch Man Season 3 has more frames than Akainu and Aokiji fighting for 7 days straight, and that's sad. So, how do they compare? The Naruto anime has a filler problem for sure, but stronger manga and anime pacing. Cut out those filler episodes, and the other episodes do just fine by themselves. The One Piece anime has a majority canon focus throughout its episodes, but has painfully slow pacing and sometimes no payoff to individual storylines due to it being ongoing for so long. The winner is Naruto. Fights. Now let's talk about one of the most important parts of any shonen anime, the battles. Naruto delivers some of the most iconic clashes in anime history. What makes them stand out is not just choreography and the variety of abilities, but their emotional weight as well. Naruto vs. Pain was a clash of ideologies about peace and suffering. Sasuke vs. Itachi uncovered years of mystery and tragedy, ending in an unforgettable emotional climax. Naruto protected Tsunade by sacrificing his hand and using Rasengan for the first time. Kakashi vs. Obito combined emotional history with breathtaking animation. Madara vs. the Shinobi Alliance displayed raw godlike power and set the bar for power scaling in anime battles. Team 7 reuniting to take down Kaguya. All of these are great arcs and have great emotional weight. Almost every major Naruto fight ties back to the character's growth, ideology, or tragedy. The fights matter because of what they represent. One Piece fights are a different beast. They're creative, unpredictable, and visually wild, thanks to devil fruits and haki. Luffy vs. Crocodile showcased resilience and the creativity of combating a foe who you couldn't hit. Luffy vs. Enel was iconic for its irony, rubber versus lightning, right? Luffy vs. Lucci in Enies Lobby is still one of the most hype fights in anime, with "I want to live" from Robin making it unforgettable. Luffy vs. Katakuri tested Luffy's endurance and creativity, and Kaido vs. Luffy gave us one of the longest and flashiest battles in shonen. But here's the difference. In One Piece, fights against the final boss are reserved for the main character. The crew or allies get their moments, but Luffy usually lands the final blow. Admirals, Yonko, even the Marines often stand by, letting Luffy carry the climax. Sometimes this makes the stakes a little bit less believable, like why would everyone leave the fate of Dressrosa to just Luffy against Doflamingo, while an admiral stood idle? I think taking down Doflamingo was more important than trying to hold back the cage, which would have eventually stopped after the warlord's defeat anyway. I mean, I know he didn't feel like it was his place, and as a Marine, he refused to work with pirates. Even Kaido didn't do anything against Doflamingo after failing to provide more smile fruits, though. There are way too many scenes saying that Kaido would take him down, but nothing of the sort even happened or was hinted at. The Yonko are supposed to represent great powers rivaling nations and entire armies, but they keep getting challenged and replaced way too often nowadays, too. It's like saying Kakashi copied 1,000 jutsu, and then he just uses Chidori and Kamui the whole series. The winner is Naruto. Power scaling. Now, both Naruto and One Piece have characters with broken powers, but who actually showcased their abilities the best? One Piece fans would think that with so many devil fruits, there's no way they're gonna lose this category, but it actually kinda does. The sheer variety of powers is not really good if you don't see the cool ones in action. The side characters are hardly even training their devil fruits, and if you do see someone training, it's all about haki and not the different ways they can actually use their devil fruits. Take this one for example. In One Piece, the Navy and the pirates are supposed to balance each other's powers out, and even though it is the government who has been controlling the world for so many years, it's usually pretty useless when it comes to fights that matter. Admirals would never go against a Yonko unless one literally came to their headquarters and drank their tea. Pirate factions keep increasing and hunting the Navy while the Fleet Admiral does the paperwork and hesitates to send any of his major forces unless Luffy is involved. All the people with the highest, strongest powers are the ones at headquarters, while all of their peons get knocked over like pins. Luffy vs. Kaido went on for like 20 episodes, and yet Blackbeard vs. Law or Shanks vs. Kid took like 5 minutes of screen time in total. Come on, they could have put more into that. Even Aokiji going against Big Mom's army or Blackbeard versus Whitebeard's commanders was shown in like 5 seconds. They should have been epic battles too. Same with the God Valley incident. Look at all the fights we got in the span of 2 chapters. You got Rogers versus Garp, Garp versus Kaido, Big Mom, and Shiki, even Zebek versus Darling. What's the point of all this world building and hype if you don't even show these different haki and devil fruit styles in detail in the fight scenes that last however many episodes? Like a single episode can contain 3 different fights between really strong characters, but then Luffy will take 20 episodes to fight Kaido by himself. Come on, people may not like it, but I would prefer seeing actual sword fights or devil fruit powers than all 7 rainbow colors spread on screen in a single frame and it being called haki. Luffy vs. Katakuri was a great fight because it showed how tough it is to fight even the top commanders because of these various powers like future haki. And a lot of the side characters can use them, and they have excellent, amazing, cool new powers that could also be explored just as in-depth as Luffy's is. By contrast, Naruto spreads the action around a bit more, and actually shows everyone using the best of their abilities against each other. Jiraiya fights Pain, and we get to see all of his ninjutsu and different styles. Shikamaru fights Hidan, Kakashi fights Zabuza, Guy versus Kisame, Sasuke versus Orochimaru, Ten Tails versus the Shinobi Alliance, Itachi versus Kabuto, all Kage versus Madara, and many more. Even side characters get highlight battles that matter and show off a variety of their abilities. This creates the sense that the entire world is involved in the struggle, not just the main hero, and each person has their own life and training and struggles. In One Piece, power scaling often leans towards titles and hype and the one-time appearance, but when it comes to showing these details, Oda often leaves much to the imagination. Legendary fights like Roger vs. Whitebeard or Shanks vs. Mihawk are not even shown. They're just mentioned and never shown in full. So while this does build hype, it just creates frustration and the lack of fight detail. For example, the Elders and Admirals are portrayed as godlike figures, yet in Egghead, the Straw Hat crew escapes with little consequence despite facing overwhelming odds, and we barely get to see the extent of the Elders' power. even though the ones we did see were pretty cool. Plot armor sometimes undermines the weight of these figures. You need to show losses on both sides, and I'm not saying it in the way of just killing off a character that you introduced in the same arc, but have some longer-lasting implications to losing. Naruto, however, grounds its power progression in training, sacrifice, and consequence. Sasuke evolves his Sharingan step by step, each stage costing him dearly. Rock Lee pays a physical price for fighting beyond his limits. The Kages showed us why they got their titles in the Great Ninja War by actually going into battle from time to time and showing off a huge variety of skills. Characters are injured, hospitalized, or even killed after major battles. They show up with different skills, with different scars, with different character development. This gives Naruto's power scaling a sense of realism and stakes. When a villain like Madara or Pain arrives, you know the heroes need training, strategy, and teamwork to stand a chance. By contrast, One Piece sometimes lets characters leapfrog in strength without explanation, a new gear or hockey ability often appearing just in time, and then the other characters don't have any new abilities for a while. So while One Piece has a broader power structure and a larger variety of strange characters with different powers, Naruto's progression and the following along of its characters feels more consistent and earned. Winner, Naruto. Impact and legacy. Now we come to the big one. Which series left the bigger mark on anime and culture? Naruto's impact. Naruto defined an entire generation of anime fans. Its themes of loneliness, perseverance, and the will to never give up resonated deeply with audiences worldwide. The emotional highs are moments that fans still talk about today, even though officially Naruto is over. Boruto just isn't the same to me. The music, the speeches, the bonds between characters all created a cultural phenomenon that shaped the 2000s. Even beyond anime and manga, Naruto's influence is everywhere. From memes, believe it, to AMVs, to merchandise, to people being cringe in school, Naruto became one of the most recognized anime franchises on the planet. Its emotional storytelling inspired countless creators to give anime a place in mainstream pop culture. This was all done without Netflix adaptations or promotions, or still being active today. One Piece, on the other hand, is less about emotional closure and more about being a living, ongoing epic. It's been on for over 25 years, selling over 500 million copies of its manga, making it the best-selling manga of all time. Its legacy is really in its scale. A story so massive that it feels like an entire universe with a myriad unended storylines, still unfolding after decades, still with so much story left. One Piece dominates in long-term cultural relevance because it's still ongoing and it'll have impact far beyond its current state. While Naruto has ended, One Piece continues to grow, its fanbase still buzzing with every new reveal. Its mystery-driven storytelling ensures that people will keep theorizing until the very end. So, how do we weigh them then? Naruto's legacy lies in its emotional storytelling and inspired a generation, but it has ended and Boruto just is not the same. One Piece's legacy lies in its cultural dominance and longevity, and it's ongoing even though it has stretched itself a little bit thin at this point, and perhaps doesn't have as much of the domination that Naruto did. My verdict is that they both win. Sorry. So, after diving into world building, politics, lore, characters, pacing, fights, power scaling, and legacy, what is the verdict? I think the winners are as such. World building, One Piece. Politics, One Piece. Lore, Naruto. Characters, tie. Naruto for depth, One Piece for diversity. Pacing, Naruto for sure. Fights, I think Naruto. Power scaling, I'm on board with Naruto. And legacy, I don't know, your choice. If you value emotional storytelling, grounded power growth, unforgettable fights, and the ability to skip an episode if it's filler and isn't relevant to you, then Naruto might be the better anime for you. But if you value epic world building, complex politics, and a story still unfolding with many mysteries to uncover on an unmatched scale, and if you've eaten a devil fruit that makes you immortal, then One Piece stands as the ultimate adventure. But at the end of the day, both are, of course, masterpieces. Both Naruto and One Piece are some of the most popular manga and anime of all time. Naruto gave us closure, tears, and inspiration. One Piece gave us freedom, adventure, and mystery. The truth is, anime fans are lucky to have both, and you should probably watch both. But whether you follow the will of Fire or the will of D, both journeys remind us of why we fell in love with anime in the first place. And that wraps up today's deep dive comparison of Naruto and One Piece. If you enjoyed this discussion, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Which one you think is the better anime overall, or which arc do you think is the best between them? Do you side with the Hokage or the Pirate King? Remember, don't underestimate the will of Fire, or the will of D's nuts! Ha! Got it!